So, on today's podcast, we're talking about the mindsets to help breathe oxygen into your culture, what mindsets can bring fuel to your team and the days ahead. Stay tuned and I'll explain more. Welcome back to the Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced the best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back, breathe in good oxygen, and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. Hey everyone, it's Jason and welcome back to the Thermostat podcast. Wherever you are and however you're coming to the podcast today, welcome in. So glad you are here. We are in season 10. We have over 345 episodes or something like that at this point. So glad that you are here. If you've been one of the people that have been with us from the very beginning of this podcast, so glad this continues to add value to your life and your work. That's awesome. And if you're new to the podcast, which we continue to grow and grow and grow, I am so fortunate to have you listening now. And I invite you to also go back and listen to the great, again, there's 345 episodes or something like that now. So all you got to do is Google my name, Jason Barger, and whatever, topic you're looking for around leadership, culture, mindset, accountability, trust, communication, whatever it is you're looking for. And chances are you're going to find that. You're also going to see some great, chats that I've had with thought leaders and friends and other people around the world talking about these amazing concepts around leadership, culture, bringing teams together, how we communicate, our own inner thoughts and how that impacts what we do. So continue to dive. I hope you'll go check out those past things. What I'll say is my commitment to you is every time I go to record one of these podcasts, I'm thinking about the listener. And again, our hope is I want this to be an opportunity, a time in your day and your week for you to step back and have some good oxygen breathed into you and help you think about that temperature that you're trying to set in your life and your work and the cultures that you're creating with the people around you. So we'll continue to do that with every episode that we record. And what I'll say is, also, I'll just throw this out there. It's been awesome for those of you that are new to the podcast and or you've been around forever. We were just recognized by Million Podcasts, an organization that looks at podcasts around the world. And the Thermostat with Jason Barger was recognized as one of the top 70 authentic leadership podcasts in the U.S., coming in at number 13, lucky number 13, actually. What an amazing recognition and appreciation, and really just sharing that with you, the listeners, because this is a cool thing for the words authentic and leadership to be together and to be recognized, and know that this podcast, again, the point, what it aims to do is to create time in your life, in your day for you to authentically step back and think about that temperature you're trying to set in your life. So grateful to receive that recognition that we knew nothing about and didn't know we were going to be recognized, and to be seen as one of those top 13 or top 70 or whatever it is podcasts in the country for this kind of authenticity is a tremendous honor. And so thanks to you, and to just share that with you, the listeners who have been with us as a part of this journey. Before we dive into today's topic, of course, the way this continues to grow and spread and wanting to amplify it to reach more people, I continue to be told that we need to invite people to do these things. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. To rate the podcast 5 stars, of course, on whatever platform you're on. That helps other people find it, again, in this sea of podcasts, and be able to find ones that hopefully are authentic for them. If you leave an authentic review in your own words, rather than AI chatbots, but your own words on whatever platform you listen to, hey, this episode resonates with me. And then obviously, share the podcast. That's the way it continues to grow and spread, is when good people say, hey, there's an episode that really resonated with me. Let me share it with the people around me, whether that's on social media or your colleagues at work, and say, let's listen to this episode and then talk about it. I appreciate everybody that does that. And this continues to grow in really exciting ways. So thank you to everyone out there and the listeners. Just because your culture was great yesterday does not mean it's guaranteed for tomorrow. Every leader, team, and organization has an opportunity to breathe oxygen into their culture every single day. Culture is dynamic, of course. You remember me saying this and reminding us of this when we talk about the word culture, which again, everybody talks about how important it is in the world, and not everybody does a great job of defining what we mean by that. But I remind us that culture is dynamic, which means it's not static. It's dynamic, which means it's always changing and it's always being shaped moment by moment every single day by the way that we think, act, and interact. That every single one of us, every person that's a part of your cultural ecosystem is shaping the culture of what it's going to become every single day by the way we think, act, and interact. And every single person in that ecosystem sets the temperature for the culture that we experience today. So the best places understand that when it comes to your culture, you can't just set it and forget it. You have to continue to find new ways to help breathe good oxygen into your people and into your culture, because it's not guaranteed to stay for tomorrow. So on today's podcast, we're talking about the mindsets to help breathe oxygen into your culture, what mindsets can bring fuel to your team and the days ahead. Stay tuned and I'll explain more. But before then, let's pause real quickly, take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Many teams and organizations right now are realizing that they need to do both. They need to engage the minds and hearts of their people in person, where everyone in the room can experience the energy of congregating together and find clarity for the road ahead. And they also need to continue to find ways to engage the minds and hearts of their people virtually, with those who are working remotely or at a distance. So, if you are in the process of planning your next team meeting, company all-hands event, conference, or culture summit, and are looking for support with a powerful keynote speech, facilitated team conversations that are the currency for change, or deeper development on leadership mindset and an intentional strategy for the culture you're trying to create, I hope you'll contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. It is my privilege and our honor to partner with great people to provide support in these areas. We want to breathe oxygen into your leaders and throughout your organization so you can set the temperature you want for your culture. We look forward to connecting with you soon. Many of you know or are familiar with my most recent book, Breathing Oxygen: How Positive Leadership Gives Life to Winning Cultures. I've been fortunate to write a number of books now. Step Back from the Baggage Claim was my first book. Remember was my second book. Thermostat Cultures being my third, and the most recent book, Breathing Oxygen: How Positive Leadership Gives Life to Winning Cultures. And so many of the elements of this book and what brought this book to life was times and a world and seeing this within organizations all over the place, but in our lives and our work, that there are oxygen givers and there are oxygen takers. And that we know, and if you've ever been a part of around people that are kind of come into a room and bring oxygen into the room, that see possibilities, that approach things with gratitude, approach it out of a spirit of mission, are about connecting of people and bringing people together to accomplish something that they can't accomplish on their own. Those are oxygen givers. And then and you've been a part of, and you've probably been a part of, unfortunately, some meetings or some teams or in environments socially where there are also just oxygen takers, people that come into spaces or in opportunities and they just suck the life out of the room by gossip or blame or pointing fingers or, that will never work. And it's often this, they're not rallying people towards something. They're kind of dividing people and pointing out what won't work. And they often just kind of suck the oxygen out of the room. And so when I talk about oxygen givers and oxygen takers, that's some quick kind of definition of what I mean by that. We know, and through my research leading into writing this book, that we know our brains use about 25% of the oxygen that we take in to fuel our organs and basic functions. And a lack of oxygen stunts our abilities to think, to move, and to make decisions. And so the same thing is true in our relationships and in our teams and organizations. Is when our oxygen is stunted, our ability to really think and move and reason and make decisions gets stunted. The National Science Foundation study says that humans have anywhere between 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts in an average day. I'll let you decide what end of the spectrum that you fall on, whether that's closer to the 12,000 thoughts in a day, or if you're a rapid high thought person, maybe up closer to the 60,000 thoughts, but you can decide that. And in that research that the National Science Foundation did, they identify that 80% of the thoughts of those 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts that we have each day, 80% of those are identified as negative thoughts. And they are kind of negative leaning. And 95% of the thoughts, they say, are repetitive. And so what does this do to ourselves, let alone our worldview, our perspective, our mood, our functions, the way our brains work, how cluttered they might be in our decision making, if they're cluttered with this kind of negative, toxic air and a lack of oxygen that's maybe stunting the way that we might be able to think. So, in a world full of rapid change, obstacles, technological advances, divided opinions, gossip, blame, etc., the best leaders, teams, and organizations know that part of their duty to steward the culture is to breathe good oxygen into their people and into that future culture they're trying to create. And what we know, not only by research, but also by leading this and being a part of this in many different organizations and also studying this for now 17 years, is that the best leaders, teams, and organizations that are creating these cultures, none of which are perfect, but they are intentional. And there's consistency that's connecting and breathing oxygen in to that culture that they're trying to create for the future. So we need good air to breathe so that we can navigate our way through the fog that ends up happening to all of us in our lives or in our organizations. And some people and some teams, we know it's easy for them to get pulled into breathing that toxic air. It's easy to get pulled into negativity and gossip and blame. It's easier oftentimes as humans to walk out of the meeting and go find the people that will just agree with us and then just kind of talk and do that triangulation stuff that I've talked about on other episodes where we pull people into this and we just get trapped in this loop of negativity and gossip and blame. But there's other people. There are oxygen givers that choose to breathe in gratitude, solutions-focused mindset, positivity that isn't just blindly, skipping around and, denying, the realities that we're facing just to, quote unquote, be positive and put on a happy face. That's not what I mean. But they are people that are choosing to believe in a future that we can create together and are willing to name those obstacles we might be facing. And they choose to communicate in a way that isn't triangulation, but is let's have direct conversation. Let's bring people together to say, where is it we're really trying to go? And what ownership do we all have in breathing oxygen into it? Those are people and teams and cultures that bring the oxygen they breathe into how they show up together, fuels their energy in positive ways, and helps them create that future that they ultimately want. So let's stop for a second and step back to breathe and to think about, are we even aware in our own lives of the factors, the conditions, the people, the situations, the activities that breathe good oxygen into us? If you pause for a second, you think about, when is it that I feel alive, that I feel like others around me are kind of giving me oxygen? And what are the conditions? Who are the people? What are the situations, the activities that seem to fuel us in this positive way? And can we also be emotionally intelligent enough to step back and identify the ones that might be stealing our oxygen or draining us? What are the factors in those situations? What are typically the conditions that seem to bring out this toxic air rather than that positive oxygen? What are the situations? Who are the people? What are the routines and patterns that seem to pull us over? None of us are perfect, no leader, team, organization is. But what are those conditions that seem to either lead us over to this kind of breathing in good air that energizes us and it helps us connect, or that toxic air that divides us and pulls us apart? And emotional intelligence, as we know, part of that is understanding what do we know about ourselves and that kind of personal self-awareness of ourself, but also what's that social competency? What are we aware of in the person across the table, in the friend group, across the organization, in our department? And then the first step is using that awareness that we have of what we might be experiencing that moment to then create habits that influence our behavioral response. And part of calibrating our own thermostat of what is the type of leader and the type of culture, that temperature we're aiming to set, do we even have clarity on that? And then each day, how do we breathe oxygen into continuing to keep ourselves focused day in and day out to live that temperature, to set that temperature in how we show up together, and then together to breathe good oxygen into each other along the way. And if you are trying to, if you're a listener right now that you're saying, I'm trying to breathe good oxygen into your culture for the road ahead, then here are a few ways that the best places fuel their ecosystem. These aren't the only things, but here are a few things to just think about of that help. If you're somebody that wants to breathe good oxygen in your culture, these are some foundational and fundamental things, not only from our experiences of supporting leaders, teams, and organizations over now 17 years of doing this, but also in our study and our research around this. Here's a few ways that the best places fuel their ecosystem. One is that they articulate the culture. They can articulate the culture. And so I would ask you, does your team and your organization have language to help articulate the temperature you aim to set as a culture? In my book, Thermostat Cultures is all about proactively setting the temperature for the culture that you desire. If we don't even know what we're aiming for or what temperature we're trying to set, then it's hard to breathe oxygen into it because we're not clear around the team and the organization of what is that temperature. And sometimes we've been clear in the past, but it's time to reframe that and bring our eyes back to, hold on, let's get back to and make sure that we're still on the same page as to what is that, how do we articulate that culture that we're trying to create in the future. The second thing I would say is then to identify actions and behaviors. Identify actions and behaviors. Identify actions and behaviors that give oxygen to the culture that you desire. And what are the actions and behaviors that are toxic to the ecosystem? Involve your people in participating in identifying these behaviors. What do they see? What are examples of actions and behaviors that breathe oxygen into the people and into that mission and that culture you're trying to create? And what are the ones that kind of steal the oxygen, stunt our decision making, are toxic to the air that we're trying to breathe? We know that our people, more and more in studying of human behavior, that people want to be owners in the future culture that you will create together. They want to be a part of that. And so if you already have the language or that clarity on action and behaviors, then great. It's an opportunity to use that as a tool. And then if not, there's an opportunity to create that together. And when you do, when you bring them into participation, it brings oxygen to people and culture just by revisiting them and talking about that together. The third thing I would point out is hiring and onboarding. How will you breathe, how we breathe good oxygen into people during the hiring process and then help them onboard into the team or the organization in ways that help them see the contributions they make to the ecosystem and how their role is a part of this culture. Not just a job to do, but it's a part of us creating that future culture. That helps breathe oxygen into people. The first 90 days of somebody's entry into your culture should be helping them learn how to breathe and contribute other good habits and oxygen to their work. And by the way, not just then 90 days you're done. That's for the history of their involvement in your organization. You ought to be doing this. But those first 90 days are really critical to help them see it's not just about doing a job. It's about their cultural contributions and the oxygen they breathe into others. A couple other things I'd point out is the development of emerging leaders. The best places identify emerging leaders. They don't want to leave, that they don't want to leave the culture. They don't want to just have a revolving door, or again, talented emerging leaders oftentimes are poached by other organizations. So who is it that you don't want to leave your culture? And then what are you going to proactively do to help breathe oxygen into them and their own development? What we know is that many, especially younger generations, they want to be developed. They want to see that you are committed to their growth. And then to realize that they are tremendous influencers for the future to other people and help being those thermostats to kind of set the temperature. So identifying and developing those emerging leaders is another way that you can breathe oxygen into your culture. I'll point out regional culture summits. Whether that's, again, regionally, or across your entire organization, depending on geographically how you're set up, there is power in congregation. There is power in congregation. This is why it's powerful to make time, again, as an entire organization of when you bring everybody together, or I've had many great examples of success of regionally and in organizations that are across the country or stationed around the world to be able to regionally bring people together. And a good ethic, I think, is quarterly, is to think about how do we put our eyes back on culture. And again, it should be our eyes should be on culture in everything we do and in every single day, in every moment, by the way we think, act, and interact, but to be thinking thoughtfully and intentionally about when is it we create the power in congregation to bring people's eyes back together, to connect those dots of not just what we do, but how we do it, and to help breathe oxygen into the collective efforts for how we do what we do and the impact that it has. And the last one I'll just point out is ongoing leadership development. The culture doesn't just magically stay the same. We know that. In fact, because it's always changing. So the culture could be going in the direction you don't want it to go. Or it's going to continue to grow and develop in that direction, but intentionally. So it's not going to just magically happen. The leadership team needs to continue to model the consistent temperature the organization aims to set. And then also they can continue to find ways to help them breathe oxygen into themselves. To be in a position of leadership can be lonely. And sometimes we can start to drift and complacency sets in. But as a leadership team, we need to continue to challenge ourselves to say, are we being the best thermostats for this organization? And how can we then be stewards of that culture? And how can we continue to challenge ourselves to breathe oxygen into that culture that we want it to become? Because it's not just realistic to think it's going to magically fall in place. We need it to be intentional and consistent. So as always, I'll leave you with a few questions to ponder for today's episode. What habit, activity, practice would help breathe good oxygen into you to fuel you this week, this month, this year? What air do you need to breathe? What toxic or unhealthy situations, gossip, negativity, blame, certain people do you need to then maybe step back from or think about how do you communicate differently with them? And lastly, what intentional strategies will you deploy in the coming months to breathe good oxygen into your people and your culture? I hope today's episode got you thinking in some good ways. I hope you breathe good oxygen in appreciation and gratitude for all the things that are within our control. The fact that we get to be thermostats to the people in our lives, thermostats for our own lives first and foremost, of who we want to be in the world and what we're aiming for. But then also to be those people that breathe oxygen into the people around us and help us connect people rather than to divide people. If today's episode got you thinking in some good ways, that we're so glad. We hope again that you'll, if you have questions, if you have thoughts, feedback for us, I hope, or if we can be helpful to the development of people and culture in your organization, I hope you'll track us down through the jasonvbarger.com website, jasonvbarger.com, or you can email us info@jasonvbarger.com. I hope you'll continue to keep tuning into this. I hope, I hope if you haven't already done this, subscribe, rate the podcast, of course, 5 stars, leave an authentic review in your own words, and share episodes that mean something to you and to bring your people together to have conversations that will be the currency for change. And remember, the best teams, the best leaders, the best cultures, they stimulate progress by recalibrating that thermostat together and then intentionally breathing oxygen into each other. So lastly, I'll remind you to step back, remember, be a thermostat, and breathe good oxygen. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using, and share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to you and your organization, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we are all ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.